Ciao.
That's sponsored by Remote HQ. Collaborate like you're in the same room. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. That's Remote HQ.
There.
No.
Now.
Wow.
Good, that's it.
Stop hitting me.
Stop hitting you?
Yes.
Why'd you come in here then?
I wanted to complain.
Oh, no, that's next door. It's being hit on the head lessons in here.
What a stupid...
A little bit less hollow. I'm still probably going to do a tiny bit of EQ, but you're not a hollow guy, Peter Cohen. Peter Cohen's here with us, everybody. Peter Cohen, I don't even know what to say. Age-old Mac dude, former angry Mac bastard. Which part is former, by the way? The angry part or the Mac part? Or the bastard part?
All of it.
It's all former?
I was a former person once.
No.
I'm somebody you used to know.
Oh, that sounds like a song, by golly.
I bet I could have a hit with that.
Yeah, maybe. Speaking of people and things we used to know, let's just go into the deep end. Normally, on Monday, we do It's News to Blank, whoever the guest happens to be that week. We're going to push It's News to Peter to Tuesday because...
Stuff happened.
Are you on the Parler? Are you on the Parlay? Are you on either one? Because they're actually two separate apps,
No.
you know. Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, good for
No,
you.
I am not on Parler.
Okay, here's the funny thing. Neither is anybody else, apparently, because Amazon has stopped hosting them. Or is going to stop hosting them tonight. I'm not sure which one it is. I asked you if you wanted to talk about this, and you were like, yeah, sure. Where do you want to begin?
Sure.
Should we, should we recap it? Should we assume that everybody knows and just move forward? I guess we should recap it a tiny bit.
Let's do an executive summary.
Okay. So Apple got in touch with Parler on, and it's really supposed to be called Parlay, but we're calling it Parler because that's what everybody calls it.
That's right.
Parler, which is French for the verb parler, which means to talk. So
Its users call it Parler, so therefore it's Parler.
So Apple got in touch with the people from Parler and said, listen, your app.
No, hang on. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's assume that our dear listeners have no idea what Parler is at all. Parler has popped up in recent months as an alternative to other social media sites like Facebook and Twitter for its quote unquote free speech support, and it's become a haven for people whose increasingly hostile and strident rhetoric seems to be unwelcome in these other spheres. And specifically, it's attracted a lot of white supremacists and nationalists and people of similar vein as a means of communicating. It's also attracted a lot of high-profile politicians that have been at the center of recent news. People like Ted Cruz, for example, has been a big adoptee. So there's at least a little bit of background. So go on. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going that way. I mean, what I was going to say was Apple got in touch with the people at Parler and said, listen, your app is being used for hateful rhetoric and seditious activity because though the app has been out for a couple of years, it's really become sort of a cause celeb and a kind of haven for people far to the right and further. And so it was actually used in a lot of the to orchestrate a lot of the unrest that happened earlier last week. And unrest is really a far too friendly term. The problem is I speak fairly diplomatically. See, I even said fairly diplomatically. I try to be diplomatic in my speech. Thugs stormed the Capitol earlier this week, and thugs is even diplomatic. I mean, these are people who are looking for people to kill. They were looking to overturn democracy. Yes.
There was an act of domestic terror committed on the Capitol building.
Yes, incited by the President of the United States, who it turns out was lying when he said, we're going to march down there and I'm going to be with you. And who would have thought that he would lie about something like that? So anyway, Apple got in touch with the Parler people and they were like, right, you got 24 hours to clean up your act. Now, I'm fairly certain that Apple knew that Parler was not going to be able to do that in 24 hours. But what they said was you need serious moderation. You need to remove all the hateful, insightful stuff, and then you can stay. And then Google said, hold my beer. We're just going to pull them off right now. So Google actually pulled Parler off the Google Play Store on Friday. Apple went ahead and gave Parler the 24 hours. But while Apple was waiting for Parler to clean up its act, Amazon came in and said, hey, you host your stuff on AWS, Amazon Web Services, except no, you don't, because we're pulling you off at midnight on Sunday. And so that brings us to the minute, I think, unless anything's happened in the past 20
pretty much up until
25.
now.
Okay.
So interestingly, a message went out from John Matze, M-A-T-Z-E. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Mm-hmm. I don't either. Go ahead.
From Parler.
Okay.
That was very conflicted. On one hand, he sounded very triumphant about how we designed our entire infrastructure to be agnostic for this sort of event. So we're not going to have any problems with continuity. We'll be able to transfer something else. But in the same message, he said he actually at this point cannot find a new host that's willing to take them on.
Right.
So they may be silenced. The interesting thing about all of this, of course, is that this is framed against the backdrop of a lot of people that are not nearly as extreme as Parler users, at least in their day-to-day presentation to the rest of the public, talking about free speech restrictions on social media, and specifically Twitter, because Twitter is now purging a lot of these same bad actors.
Yeah, we totally forgot to mention the fact that Twitter pulled Trump on Friday. The president of the United States no longer has a platform or no longer has a place on Twitter.
For years we've been asking ourselves, what would it take for Twitter to finally silence him? And it turns out that orchestrating a terrorist event against the legislature was their line in this.
Well, except it actually turned, and who knows, when I say actually, a couple of articles that I've seen say it wasn't even that did it. It was a bunch of Twitter employees saying, all right, seriously, this time, right? Before Twitter finally did it.
I think it's really interesting also that all of this comes against the backdrop of Ajit Pai of the FCC explicitly basically saying, look, we're not going to do anything about CDA, the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, under this administration. Basically saying, okay, that is still the law of the land. They are common carriers for this information. They are not publishers, and therefore not liable for the content that's on them. I think that signaled to the lawyers for Google, Apple, Amazon that, yeah, you guys can take action here, and there are not going to be broad, governmental interventions anyway if you do so.
Well, I mean, there are some things that I would say, like, you've got 12 days left of this administration, or 11 or 10. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that nothing should happen as far as the president. I think something seriously needs to happen as far as the president, because 10 days or 12 days is an eternity when you command armed forces and a nuclear arsenal. 10 to 12 days is the blink of an eye as far as, if the FCC thought it was going to try to do something to Apple or Google or Facebook or whomever. I mean, they might get finished drafting up something by, noon on the 20th when the next administration is being sworn in. Let me do the other thing really quickly, though, and I feel certain I know what your answer is going to be to this, but I've been trying to figure out how best to frame the response. There are people who are saying that free speech is being violated by, purging these people from Twitter. And immediately you can say, well, Twitter is a for-profit company. Free speech applies to a free press, applies to really the government not being able to squelch somebody else's speech. But that sort of falls on deaf ears. I'm trying to figure out if there's a better way to say why this is not a free speech issue. Or is it a free speech issue?
It is and it isn't. The thing about this is that I think it was H.L. Mencken, the famous curmudgeonly journalist, who said that freedom of the press is limited to those who own one.
Okay.
In the modern age, we all own our own presses.
Right.
And we are dependent upon this entire infrastructure that exists, this for-profit infrastructure that's privately corporate controlled in order to express our ideas. We've gotten used to the idea of Twitter or Facebook or social media in general as being a public commons, but it is not. It's an illusion. So, yeah, this is the crossroads that we find ourselves at today.
More of the Parler parlay in a moment, but first a word from Remote HQ, letting you collaborate as if you were in the same room. Back in the day, working together was as easy as pulling up a chair, sharing notes, leaning in and looking over somebody's shoulder. We may get back to that someday, but that day is definitely not today. Today, we need new tools to give us that togetherness, and Remote HQ can be those. Remote HQ gives your group access to the kinds of things you would have if you were working together. A whiteboard anybody can write on, a shared web browser anybody can control, notes anybody can add to, plus access to apps your team already uses like Google Docs, Miro, Dropbox, and more. So even if you can't be together, you can work together like you're together. Try it and see. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. Give Remote HQ a try. Go to remotehq.co/minutes for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the code MINUTES for 3 months free. And now back to the artist formerly known as Peter Cohen. The thing that I keep thinking about is I used to love the idea of cyberspace as a space. I used to try to think of the internet as literally a place you could go. And I'll tell you honestly, I came up with that idea when people started domain squatting. Because if you were HP and weren't smart enough to get HP.com, I kind of felt like the person who got that piece of land, maybe, you owed them a couple bucks because they were smart enough to buy land next to you. It's like when Disney had to go and spend a ton of money for the land that they bought around Disneyland. Because shouldn't they have thought of that? It's a lesson they learned when they did Disney World. All of which is to say, if you had a bar and all of a sudden a bunch of Nazis were meeting in your bar and you didn't want them to do Nazi stuff in your bar, you could kick them out of your bar. Now, there may be issues. There may be concerns there as far as for your own safety, and you may have to call the cops or something like that. But if you have a private business where a bunch of Nazis are getting together to do Nazi stuff, you can kick them out. And that's what Twitter is.
Yeah, because
I know
being a
Twitter
Nazi is not a protected class, right? If they were a protected class, it would be a different story. But you're not a protected class when you're a Nazi, so you can get booted out. And you see, this is the thing, right? Businesses refuse to do business with customers who are known jerks all the time. Mm-hmm. You go into your average deli, and you'll see a sign hanging over the counter saying, "We reserve the right to refuse." Service to whoever we damn well please.
Yeah.
It's the way of the world. Businesses can do that. Corporations are people, friend.
And let's be clear. I mean, it literally took the president of the United States inciting people to revolt against another branch of the federal government before they were finally like, all right, well, we got to put a stop to this.
Yeah. I mean, think about what would have happened maybe 5 years ago if they were a little bit more proactive about this. The landscape of the world might look very different. I have a lot of thoughts on this that we can't fit into this segment, but my top line point, Ken, that I want to drive home here is that I think that one of the big problems with the technology industry, whether it's social media or whether it's the engineering of new hardware products or new software products that we use, is that a lot of the decisions about how these products and services are made are being made by people with really low emotional quotients or EQs. Really low emotional intelligence. They're people who just don't understand the social and psychological ramifications of what they're doing and can't scale those ideas to populations. And that's the situation that we're faced with today, is that the technology is out of control, and the way that it is used, or the way that it's developed and the way that it's managed, is going to continue to cause problems. Social media is almost the entire revenue model for social media is based on stimulating and continuing to foment outrage, constant doom scrolling, as they call it now, right? Twitter makes money whenever you're doom scrolling on Twitter because you're seeing sponsored ads pop up. You're seeing sponsored posts pop up. You're seeing information that people are paying to put in front of your eyes. And it works the same on Facebook as well. This is how they make money. And this is supplanted for so many of us, how we actually get our information, how we get our news. And, it's maybe I sound like an old fuddy-duddy coming at this from, 20 years of tech journalism, but that's dangerous, man. When you let the Fourth Estate turn into the outrage machine, you're going to get problems like this. You're going to get a generation of young people that don't know how to, express their problems constructively and ended up storming the Capitol building. A lot of those people who were there last week were, under 40. There's monocultures that pop up online. Again, that's the evidence that we're seeing with stuff last week. So there is just so much to unpack here and such little time to do it. But God, it's a mess. But we all have to be mindful of this, and we all have to kind of remove ourselves and step back and say, "Hey, wait a minute, what's subjectively going on?" Because there's so much gaslighting going on as well while all of this is happening, trying to make us disbelieve that which we're seeing unfold in real time. Trust your instincts. Trust, your ability to differentiate when somebody is lying to you from when somebody is telling the truth to you, and just to have the cognitive ability to unpack that stuff. Also, eat your vegetables and drink your milk.
Oh, and wash your hands and wear a mask.
Stay in school.